Welcome. Thank you. Severin. Severin's back. And with Severin being back, we've had some interesting conversations about whether we're going to return to singing. Severin has specifically asked me to stop singing, which I was a little hurt by, but nothing to do with masks. That's just an issue of taste. It looks like in a couple weeks we're going to have the choir sort of ramping up to sing outside the doors with these funny duck-like masks. Hold one of them up there, Robin. Robin's got these funny masks. We're going to sing outside, which you can do if you're 12 feet apart. So we're going to be sung at soon enough from the doors. I think laughing is appropriate, Leanne. I believe it is appropriate. I do want to announce that this church sits on what was Tongva land not too long ago. And if you're curious about maybe your hometown, if you go to native-land.ca, you can see what native populations inhabited the land that you probably call a town or associate with a zip code. So that's somewhat interesting. I have very sad news that, I don't want to save it for joys and concerns, but George Greghorn, who's a founding member of this church, passed away just a day or two ago. I found out yesterday from his daughter. George is one of the most important, maybe the most important member this church has ever had, arguably. Amazing guy, big donor for all these years, even when they could barely come to church. And there, Barbara and George are in their mid-90s, roughly, and George has struggled. He had intestinal surgery and has really been sort of uncomfortable for the last couple of years, quite frankly. But George is a sweet guy, just one of that greatest generation of people that, built the church and was the president and everything. So I always told George I want to be like him when I grow up. So there we are. was also, sadly, a shooting at Redondo Pier, which brings kind of gun violence a little bit closer to home. And we're in an interesting place culturally, right? Sirhan, Bobby Kennedy's murderer, just got parole, which is I don't know how to feel about that. And at the same time, we're like a return to the past. We have the 50-year anniversary of Martin Luther King's I Had a Dream speech. I think it was yesterday. And now we're still fighting for voting rights. So there we go. We had a meeting about gathering back. We tried to space out the seats. Please try to be cooperative. Please work to keep your masks on. The UUA has, indoor stuff, masks on. I'm talking, so otherwise I'll put it on. We're going to go outdoors with activities, which we've been doing. We've been doing pretty good. We've got the kids are at risk, as if you've paid any attention to the news. So we're going to keep them outside and distanced and all of those kind of things. The UUA is encouraging vaccinations their language is pretty strong, actually. I'm going to read it. Create an expectation that vaccinations are required for everyone who is eligible and work to have the highest vaccination rate possible in your community and regarding staff and all of those people who work with kids in particular. Okay. Our beloved new attendee, Angela, has coordinated worked into shape these 4 dinners, and I'm going to let her speak about them because we're pushing off the start.
So 4 Sunday suppers, starting September 12th, maybe. We may push it back to October 3rd because of our conditions. Mm-hmm. And it's 4 suppers. They're going to be bento box suppers, so individualized, prepared by the Skid Row People's Market and Cafe. And we're trying to take our experience of race relations deeper. In other words, you'll be seeing these people, and you have a chance to create new friends, and they will be from all parts of LA. That's our invitation. Yeah.
So once we'll soon have those sign-ups available online, and you can register with GOC.org.
We have a program called the
Gift of Compassion.
GoCompassion.org.
Go Compassion.
And it's associated with commonweal.org. You look them up. It'll all be on the announcement.
Thank you. Thanks, Angela. Okay, I'm going to invite Gary up to read our chalice words, and I will light our chalice.
Today's chalice words come from Helen Cohen from a poem entitled Summer Warmth. We stand at the edge of summer. The sun has at last warmed us enough that we begin to trust in its presence. O source of the turning seasons, of earth of life, of promise, gradually becoming fulfillment, may as the season begets, you find a lightening of the burdens with the brightening of the sky.
About a month ago, maybe even less, Leanne sent me a Wired article about a report from the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. The news was awesome. The growing awareness of humanity's collective impact it is having on the planet has caused a near immediate revolution in human behavior that has reduced, among many great factors, a great reduction in our carbon impact on the planet. No. That was not the report. I wish it was. As we speak, with a fast diminishing amount of time to turn it around, the planet is shifting. We see it in hurricanes. We see it in fires. Severin spent a little bit of time, spent the summer up north and experienced a general cloudy haze that sort of ruined the northern summer and is a forecaster of other things happen. We obviously need to care. Wendell Berry writes, I think we would all agree that we need to move from a spirituality of alienation from the natural world to a spirituality of intimacy, from a spirituality of the divine revealed in words primarily to a spirituality the divine is revealed in the visible world around us, from a spirituality concerned with justice merely to humans to a spirituality of justice to the devastated earth community. Today we're going to have a lot of beautiful images. We're going to have quite a bit of softness. The images you'll see that Kelly pulled together, wonderful images, are taken of nice things, and I'm going to mix that in with some doom and gloom and some beautiful news about the planet. But first, a hymn we can't sing. Take it away, Sev.
You can mouth the words to yourselves, I guess. For the beauty of the earth, for the splendor of the skies, for the love which from our birth over and around us lies, source of all, to thee we raise this our hymn of grateful praise. For the joy of ear and eye, for the heart and mind's delight, for the mystic harmony, linking sense to sound and sight, source of all, to thee we raise this our hymn of grateful praise.
I'd like to invite our kids down for our children's moment. Come on down and space yourselves out as much as you can, just to be safe. We just heard that hymn, Source of All, to Thee we praise. This our hymn of grateful praise, right? But the source is a little bit unclear, isn't it? Like, it's not always clear what the source of all of creation is it? There's our planet right there, and soon enough we're going to see images of things that the earth has spun into existence. Pretty cool, right? Yeah. Look at the grasshopper there. We're going to talk about a grasshopper. Mary Oliver wrote this great poem. Who made the world? Who made the swan and the black bear? Who made the grasshopper? This grasshopper, I mean. They're amazing. The one who has flung herself out of the grass, the one who is eating sugar out of my hand, who is moving her jaws back and forth instead of up and down, who is gazing around with her enormous and complicated eyes. This was taken on my windshield last summer. How cool is that? Wow. Yeah. Now she lifts her pale forearms and thoroughly washes her face. You'll see her do that. There you go. Now she snaps her wings open and floats away. You won't see that. Mary Oliver says, and this is the important part of the message today, I don't exactly know what a prayer is, but I do know how to pay attention, how to fall down into the grass, how to kneel down in the grass, how to be idle and blessed, and how to stroll through the fields, which is what I've been doing all day, she says. Tell me what else I should have done. Doesn't everything die at last and too soon? Tell me. Tell me what it is you plan to do with your one wild and precious life. You like that one, Kim, huh? Kim is moved, if no one else. Mary Oliver. So we have this magical world we live in, and we also have these compelling, yearning things. I was on a plane yesterday. If anybody remembers Candace, who was here a couple years ago, writer, mid-30s, African-American woman. I just married her and her husband, Jonathan, who you might remember. They came here. And I remember the plane shook, and boy, I'll tell you, I know how to pray when the plane shakes, I'll tell you that. But boy, we have this magical quality about both paying attention to the wonder of the world, which I hope you do, and then also dropping into your own hearts for your own, experiencing your own frailty and your own yearnings and your own dreams. And we come to church to balance those two things out and really to learn how to live. And I think part of learning how to live is to falling down in the grass and wasting the day being idle. So there we go. Let's sing out our kids with our little Singing Out Our Kids song. Go now in peace, everyone. Go now in peace.
Go with wonder,
There we go. Sing that
go
one.
to meet a brand new
Thanks, guys.
day. Learn to see the light within you as we send you on your way.
Now time for joys and concerns, and I'm going to invite Leanne to come up and light candles for us, and I'm going to grab a couple wipes and do our best to meet our needs and be safe at the same time. Yeah, one more for, well, everything. The good and the bad, the sweet moments and the hard ones. All that. I think you're really going to enjoy this. Kelly pulled together a beautiful, there's a beautiful meditation by David Abrams, and it's in another experiential piece like the Grasshopper, and Kelly pulled together these beautiful images that I think you'll see. Well, I'm not trying to build it up and set her up for failure here, but here we go. This is our prayer. Late one evening, I stepped out of my little hut in the rice paddies of eastern Bali and found myself falling through space. Over my head, the black sky was rippling with stars, densely clustered in some regions, almost blocking out the darkness between them, and more loosely scattered in other areas, pulsing and beckoning to each other. Behind them all streamed the great river of light with its several tributaries. Yet the Milky Way churned beneath me as well, for my hut was set in the middle of a large patchwork of rice paddies, separated from each other by narrow 2-foot-high dikes. And these paddies were all filled with water. The surface of these pools by day reflected perfectly the blue sky, a reflection broken only by the thin, bright green tips of new rice. But by night, the stars themselves glimmered from the surface of these paddies, and the river of light whirled through the darkness underfoot as well as above. There seemed no ground in front of my feet, only the abyss of star-studded space falling away forever. I was no longer simply beneath the night sky, but also above it. The immediate impression was of weightlessness. I might have been able to reorient myself to regain some ground and gravity, were it not for the fact that it confounded my senses entirely. Between the constellations below and the constellations above drifted also countless fireflies, their lights flickering like the stars themselves, some drifting up to join the clusters of stars overhead, like graceful meteors slipping down from above to join the constellations underfoot. And all these paths of light, upward and downward, were mirrored as well in the still surface of the paddies. I felt myself at times falling through space, at other moments floating and drifting, I simply could not dispel the profound vertigo and giddiness. The paths of the fireflies and the reflections in the water's surface held me in a sustained trance. Even after I crawled back to my hut and shut the door on this whirling world outside, I felt that now the little room in which I lay was itself floating free from the earth. Take that possibility, hold it in your heart for just the next 45 seconds or so, and remember the resource we have in this great earth.
Okay, it's time for you guys to get to work. We're going to do a responsive reading, your favorite. This one's a Chinook blessing. Yours is the little part at the bottom. I do all the hard work. We call upon the earth, our planet home, with its beautiful depths and soaring heights, its vitality and abundance of life. Together we ask that it teach us and show us the way. We call upon the mountains, the high green valleys and meadows filled with wildflowers, the snows that never melt, the summits of intense silence. And we ask that they reach us and show us the way. We call upon the waters that rim the earth, horizon to horizon, that flow in our rivers and streams, that fall upon our gardens and fields. And we ask that they teach us and show us the way. We call upon the land which grows our food, the nurturing soil, the fertile fields, the abundant gardens and orchards. And we ask that they teach us and show us the way. We call upon the forests, the great trees reaching strongly into the sky, with earth in their roots and the heavens in their branches, the fir and pine and the cedar. And we ask them to teach us and show us the way. We call upon the creatures of the fields and forest and the seas, our brothers and sisters, the wolves and deer, the eagle and dove, the great whales and the dolphin, the beautiful orca and salmon. And we ask them to teach us and show us the way. We call upon all those who have lived on this earth, our ancestors and our friends, who dreamed the best for future generations and upon whose lives our lives are built. And with thanksgiving, we call upon them to teach us and show us the way.
Beautiful blessing, isn't it? I'm not sure what the orca would teach us. Hunting techniques, I guess. Preparing servants can be frustrating business in part because so often I've said this before, I'm sure, I want to crack the words in half and crawl out to hand people experiences rather than just dialogue and words. It's a familiar frustration. Today, more than usual, I feel it. The sermon is built on that desire to bust out of the word trap, stop talking, and show you something like that wordless rice paddy experience. It's also motivated by the simple, reliable, transformative beauty of the natural world. This is an environmental sermon, and as you know, so much about what we get about the earth these days is a lamentation of our tendency to neglect and abuse and to take advantage of the natural world, usually involving scaring ourselves with stats about CO2 and overpopulation. And it's probably the truest of the modern truths that the world needs both less of us humans on it and a more careful reduction of our consumption and pollution patterns. It's just the truth. So, given that truth, I'm going to scare you. The doomsday clock, right? We're all of the generation that remembers, has heard that phrase at least. It was invented in 1947 as a way for atomic scientists. They came up with it to scare us about the dangers, mostly of nuclear weapons at the time. It's a symbol of humanity's imminent destruction, which was caused and was basically pieced together as the Soviet Union and the United States built up our nuclear arms supplies. That year, they set the time at 7 minutes to midnight, 1957. By 49, it was 3 minutes to midnight as the relationship between the US and the Soviets deteriorated. In 1953, after the first test of the hydrogen bomb, the doomsday clock ticked to 2 minutes until midnight. The bulletin was at its most optimistic in 1991 when the Cold War thawed and the US began to cut their arms depots. That year, the clock was set back at 17 minutes to midnight. From then on, it was a gradual creep back up the scale. As hopes of total nuclear disarmament vanished and threats of nuclear terrorism sort of stabilized, but then we began to fear climate change. That started to creep in more and more. In 2010, the Bulletin found some hope in some of the arms reduction treaties and the international climate talks that bumped the minute back to 6 minutes at that time. And they had some hope when Obama's term in office, Robert Sokolow, the chair of the board, determined the clock position, saying that the U.S. leadership in climate change, setting the path for a world free of nuclear weapons. But by 2012, with the world's hottest year on record, the clock had pushed back forward a minute. It was the hottest year. And there was devastating drought and brutal storms, if you remember. These extreme events are exactly what climate models predict, and it's exactly what we're experiencing today. There was some progress. The clock moved 30 seconds forward at one point to 2.5 minutes when Trump's presidency and his statements about upping nuclear weapons and his denial of climate change took place. We're at 100 seconds right now. I mean, it's obviously a contrived statement. And the world humanity doesn't necessarily self-destruct all at once when it hits zero. That doesn't happen. But here's a little perspective. because I think we have a vision problem. If the Earth is 7 billion years old, that's roughly half the entire age of the universe. And if you took those 7 billion years and you divided them into a frame of 365 days, in the roughest sense, humans have been around on Earth for one day. One day. In that 24-hour span, in that one day, maybe a day and a half, it seems like our origins extend back a little bit. Civilization is 30 minutes old. I like to think this is optimistic. 30 minutes old, and the modern scientific age we were born in, let's call it the discovery of oil, right around that time, 2 minutes old. 7 billion into a year, 2 minutes. 2 minutes ago, we also had much more global cannibalism around the globe. It was fading, of course. We were discussing, but hardly ended, slavery in America. Women couldn't vote. It was a lot of bad things. It was arguable that only 7 seconds ago, in the year of the Earth's life, we became aware that our actions affected the planet. It's not a lot of time for turning around the radius we have. But it's hopeful. This is kind of a consistent of my best hopeful themes. Things happen faster than we think they do. They do. Think about the vast difference that we felt about the races 200 years ago. People in Asia were incredibly other than the white Americans who lived here. Now we intermarry. There's conflict for sure. We're spending a lot of time talking about that. It's hardly perfect, but it's a lot different. We have a new vision, an influential body of opinion all over the world that knows that there's a civilization crisis that lies in our disconnection with nature. We've forgotten where we come from. We've forgotten how short an amount of time we've been living like this. If we've learned nothing in church since the pandemic, we've learned that our society stands on a bedrock of racism, and if we're learning nothing, we should realize that our relationship with Earth is as flexible as that is. Think about that. We have the possibility of turning this whole thing around, both the scourge of racism and the scourge of our decline into madness with the environment. 7 seconds, 2 minutes, right around there, we began to see the Earth as a resource, a storehouse of minerals and raw materials rather than the kind of ethos that the Chinook blessing speaks about. I'm a big believer that it's a good idea to say out loud what you are going to plan on doing. Kind of my own therapy to myself. I'm going to drink every day and not plan if it will catch up with me or not. We are going to mostly live lives devoid of a connection to the natural world, but be expected to rise up and entirely alter the patterns of consumption we have to save it. Hardly as important as carbon emissions, but a good example of the change is the connection kids have to Mother Earth. Not long ago, most of us, when we were kids, spent long days fully engaged in outdoor play with curiosity and wonder and frogs and all those things. We were engaged and our senses were alive and we had grasshoppers in our hands. A University of Cambridge study, even as recent as a decade ago, found out that a group of 8-year-olds were less able to identify common wildlife species, fairly common wildlife species, as they were Pokemon characters. that can change fast. Todd Christopher, inventor of greenhour.org, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's for kids to spend an hour of green time every day, believes it'll make them happier and healthier and smarter. We have forgotten where we come from, haven't we? We live lives disconnected from that. We need to have fear, but we need to have joy. It's the only way we're going to solve the race issue. It's the only way we're going to solve the climate problem, too. And I think that we need to have a more sensuous and fulfilling relationship with nature itself. Some uninvented recipe yet needs to tell us that we need to love the earth more and live with a little bit less. Here's a little bit of a stab at that recipe. Let's first try to fall under the spell of the planet's beauty. You're no doubt looking at a lot of this and reading great quotes. David Rhodes, a sage of environmental spirituality, also a Christian, says that worship is the central reoccurring event in the life of any religious community. It's about right. He suggests that it is in the gathered community at worship that we celebrate our life together and affirm our identity and values. Worship is, in our case, or our Sunday service more comfortably, the place where we articulate our fundamental beliefs and values, and we seek to return to a new sense of self, even in a small way. We try to restore our moral rootedness, don't we? It's a high standard, but I think we try to do that. Maybe without ostentatious, grand expectations, but it is ideally part of why we come. If this power and this moment has that place, I think we can ask ourselves for a minute how we can better defend the earth. How can we better live in alliance with the earth? I think one of the steps to do is continually indulge in the wonder of creation. Might work to challenge, as the Chinook blessing suggests, lift up animals and flowers and trees as partners in the creation of the universe. Cultivate a real gratitude for what we have, a real thanksgiving, as you would say. This is hardly a novel sermon, I understand that. We could cultivate a sense of confession, too. Confess the greed and indifference by which we have despoiled the earth, bred to double the amount of the earth's population in most of our lifetimes, place so much of the rest of the animal kingdom and the plant kingdom in jeopardy with our just commitment to growth. We could offer if this language is helpful, as agents of God, or guardians of the earth, if you'd rather, stewards of its resources, lovers of life, earth keepers, caretakers of the land, to maintain and restore creation in its best form, not without us, but with us. We can treasure it. Martin Buber, he says we can improve our environmental challenges if we adopted an I-thou relationship to the earth. To speak to earth as thou. To give it respect and equality as opposed to earth as an it. I like that. It's easy to objectify it. It doesn't talk back. But what if it was a thou? What if all these plants out here, we had relationships with them like the natives speak of? Here's two takes on creation. One by Tim Kutzmark, who's the minister of the UU Church in Davis, at least the last time I checked in with him. The second is from Genesis. I like these. Let's go back to the beginning. Not the beginning of this service, not the beginning of this day or the beginning of this year, but to the beginning of all beginnings. Let's go back. Imagine it. Even nothingness is not. There's no air, nor heavens beyond it. There is only darkness wrapped in endless darkness. There is only silence, absolute silence. Then in one astounding instant, the silence is broken. A sacred sound explodes into the abyss. And now, Genesis. At the beginning of the creating of heaven and earth, when the earth was wild and waste, darkness over the face of the ocean, rushed a spirit of life, hovered over the face of the waters. The Holy One said, "Let there be light," and there was light, and it was good. Not too different. In the original Hebrew text of Genesis, only two words were spoken. Yahai, or which translates simply as the command light. And pray tell, 15 billion years ago, there was a big bang of electronuclear force and light, unfathomable in its brilliance, erupted into the universe, evolving life, unfathomable in its brilliance and complexity, erupting into being. To be there, if you could imagine that from a safe distance, which there was none, of course, would have been an incredibly sensual experience. You would have a hard time intellectualizing that experience, right? It would have been immensely beautiful. The world is immensely beautiful. Thai Buddhist monk Behiku, probably butchered the name. The entire cosmos is a cooperative. The sun, the moon, the stars live together as a cooperative. The same should be true for humans, animals, trees, and the earth. When we realize that the world is a mutual, interdependent, cooperative enterprise, then we can build a noble environment. If our lives are not based on this truth, then we shall perish. No reference to a doomsday clock or scientists. I think that love and beauty are secret, like the cop show SCI, like clues that the world has a heart behind it, something blessed behind it, that there's magic woven into this place. A little bit of fear, a little bit of wonder and joy, and we might just get to be the people that truly become those stewards, that understand we're in a new place in regards to the planet and to each other, and make the change that's required to make this place sing. Amen. I have a joke, but I have to find it. Somewhere I lost it. Okay, I don't have a joke. Give generously. I see you spent the summer learning how to play the piano. Yeah. So here's my joke. I dedicated this to our president, Melissa, who's got a lot of kids who were in the World Series. And there was a couple of older guys that would sit and watch the Little League World Series every year, and they loved the games, and they would just, appreciate the youth and the kids and all that stuff. And they were getting older. One of the guys passed away, but before they passed away, the other one said, "After you die, promise me, if at all possible, you'll come back and you'll tell me whether there's baseball in heaven." So one of them passes away, and he comes back in a dream to the other one, and he says, "I've got some good news, and I've got some bad news." He says, "The good news is there is baseball in heaven." He says, "The bad news is you're pitching tomorrow night." All right. Let's do our affirmation of gratitude. Here we go. Let us be grateful when we are able to give, for many do not have that privilege. Let us be grateful for all those who share their gifts, for we are enriched by their giving. And let us also be grateful for our needs, so that we may experience the generosity of others. Gary's going to come up and read the first part of our closing words here for us.
If I can get the mask off. This church is dedicated to the proposition that behind all our differences, beneath all our diversity, there is a unity that makes us one and binds us forever together in spite of time and death and the space between the stars. We pause in silent witness to that unity.
May the blessing of love be upon you. May love's presence abide with you. May it illuminate your hearts now and forevermore. So be it. Amen. Shalom, salam, namaste, and blessed be. And ideally, if we're walking out of this church inspired, now our service truly begins.
Amen.